Globalizing Your Content Strategy with Adobe and SmartLink. I'm Steve Etzler with Business Development Institute. I would like to first thank our speakers, Matthias Siegel, Group Product Manager for AEM for Adobe, Matt DeLoca, Vice President Channel and Alliances for SmartLink, and Andrew Sachs, Vice President of Product for SmartLink. I would also like to recognize our sponsor, SmartLink, for making this webinar possible. And of course, a big thank you to you, our attendees, for investing your valuable time with us today. We have a very simple agenda. The webinar will run for 60 minutes. The first part of the program will be presentations, short demonstrations from Matthias, Matt, and Andrew. This final part of the program will be an audience question and answer session. So we encourage you to please submit your questions through GoToWebinar. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available on demand after the event. So with that, let's begin. Matt?
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, good morning, maybe good evening. My name is Matt DeLoca. I'm just going to do a few slides here to set things up. And if you can see my screen now, I just want to chat a little bit about a few of the trends that we see affecting content strategy with enterprises. And if you're using Experience Manager now, or you're thinking
Matt, we're not seeing your screen yet.
Oh, okay. I think we need to pass control to Andrew. And I can still chat through this while we're bringing things up. As I mentioned, if you're using Experience Manager today, or if you're considering using it, you may recognize some of these trends in the things you're facing. The first is international growth. Businesses of all types are selling more products and services around the world in more locales, both online and in brick and mortar. And as a result of that, they really have to address their content strategy to meet those markets, oftentimes in languages other than their original headquarters business. The second is one that we all know about well, which is the explosion of mobile devices. The ITU published last week, there are now 3.2 billion people online on their mobile devices, and it's the first time it's actually surpassed home broadband users, which is an incredible stat. Next trend we're seeing, and our customers tell us about, is very fragmented content platforms within their organizations. As much as enterprises try to centralize, they become siloed. They have multiple agendas for content communication. They tend to buy lots of different platforms, which proliferates different formats, and that creates a great deal of complexity in terms of reaching a global audience. And the final one, which I think all marketers are facing, is the increasing rise of content marketing as a core discipline within the digital marketing group. What used to be a single document type or maybe a handful of outreaches that would go on during the course of a particular calendar year or quarter is now a dizzying array of different formats, from infographics to videos to blog posts, and a whole array of new content types that not only need to reach audiences but reach them on different devices and also be optimized for SEO. So what does that mean in terms of your global content strategy? It really means you need to address the challenges of global content with technology. So just as CMSs have evolved to address the increasing complexity of content creation, translation management technology is now available to address that increased complexity across the globe. As the evolution of content marketing has created these new formats and created all these new device types that you need to reach, you now have many more different renditions of content you need to create. As a result of that, you also have more content creators. You don't just have the original folks working within AEM or within other content offering formats and platforms, but you've now got translators and editors, and in some cases, other reviewers in locale around the world, all trying to collaborate simultaneously. And what this complexity necessitates is really a global content strategy. And while Experience Manager provides an incredible set of features and capabilities for managing a community of global contributors, a global content strategy really now means how do you take that original content and deliver it in personalized experiences, in localized experiences, in every single market you want to sell into. And for that, what you really need is a translation management system. So what's a translation management system? It's made up of really 4 core components, and Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about how we offer technology for translation management, but really the core components that are required are very similar to the types of things you need in your content management system. You need APIs, and so a good translation management system has APIs to communicate with all of the different content systems an enterprise uses to create their original content and keep it localized and translated over time. The second key feature for a translation management system is great workflow tools and the ability to manage the use that are contributing, again, around the world, across time zones, in multiple office environments, and all the rules associated with when content is handed to different individuals and different roles within the process. The next, of course, similar to the way content is authored in a CMS, you need to have great translator tools. So think of translators as an additional set of content creators who are now transforming content from its original form into new languages and into new localized versions. So those tools have to be really high quality to be sure that the quality content that's created is on voice and exactly on brand in every single market. And finally, another key component is very robust reporting and analytics. The ability to not only track how your business is seeing an uplift from the localized markets, but also measuring the performance of the system itself and everything that's happening within the translation management system. All that you're doing to optimize that process and get proper feedback as you go along and making sure that you continue to improve. So the real value here in a translation management technology kind of surfaces in 3 ways. The first is automation. Think of it as a way to automate at every turn. You can automate the way content is brought into the system, the way it's delivered out to the various constituents who need to work with it, all of the workflow components to make sure that it's delivered efficiently and quickly, and then automating the way it's returned back to where it came from. And what we'll talk about today specifically is how we take content and return content to Adobe Experience Manager and how we do that very efficiently with an integration that we've created. The next important piece of translation management technology is real-time visibility and control. So just as it's important to be able to have visibility into all of the content creation workflows within AEM, you simultaneously want to have the same visibility and control over how that content's being translated and localized and get that feedback back in the AEM environment. And finally, it's really about making sure that you can ensure global brand management. You spend lots of time and money to create the very best brand messages across multiple platforms and across multiple markets. Translation management technology is going to give you the ability to make sure that that global brand management is the very best it can be. So with that, I'm going to pass the control over to Andrew Sachs, who's our Vice President of Product, and he's going to talk a bit about how we manifest translation management technology within the SmartLink platform. Andrew?
Great, thank you, Matt. So when we talk about the translation management platform, and when we talk about it at SmartLink, we talk about a system that can span an entire enterprise. So both technology, both people, both just organizational setup. When we look at how AEM integrates into the SmartLink platform, it's really just a component of an overarching architecture. So when we look at the platform, SmartLink supports more than a half dozen, and AEM is one of those. But in addition to AEM and various content management systems, there's a lot of other documents and files that might be in an enterprise that need to be translated, whether it's a mobile app or Word documents or InDesign files. Whatever it might be, those can be directly integrated into a platform. And it's important to have this platform architecture because if you're translating content in an HTML file or in content from AEM, you may want to be able to apply those same translations to content in a Word document or content on a support site. So as you look at an architecture and a system that can really span across an entire enterprise, you get a lot of leverage and a lot of sharing and a lot of cost savings, as well as quality control as you look to see how the content can really be manipulated and utilized across an organization. In addition, you want to make sure that there's open points. So if you have your own custom parts of a platform, something internal, can you integrate translation into that workflow? if there are different HR systems or development tools that need to be integrated and have translation or localization part of it, can you do that, and does the translation platform support that? Further, as we look at how people interact with the translation management system, it's really about the users who are in the system. You may have people in your organization who are project managers or terminologists or localization managers, and maybe even people around the world who can do review of content. And can they all participate in the translation process at the correct point in time? And then, of course, the translation has to actually get done. Does that get done by agencies and vendors you hire? Is it internal resources? Is it machine translation or some other third party that might be integrated? So at Smartly, when we talk about the platform, we look at an entire global enterprise and how everyone can participate in it, and how we can be both technology agnostic, vendor agnostic, so really anyone can participate in the platform. So some objectives of how we help our clients, in addition to AEM, but really across the entire platform. So when we look at how content creators are building their content and submitting it for translation, we want to make sure that they stay in their platform. On the translation side of things, we want to make sure that there's the workflows necessary to build out translation. So and to reduce the time to market. Are you having a 5-step workflow with a legal review, or is it just translation and editing by third-party vendors? Translation tools are, of course, important. Smartly, we talk a lot about context, and we'll show this in a few minutes, but it's the difference between a translator knowing if home is someone's house or home is in a link to a home page. And then at the end of the process, you really want to be able to report on it. Can you measure and optimize around the translation workflow? We'll talk a little bit about translation velocity in a minute, but it's really about making sure that translation and localization doesn't interfere or hinder the content creation process. You want to go live to market as quickly as possible. So in talking about content creators and their platform, and with an integration into AEM, it's really about submitting the content in AEM, getting a quote back. So how much is this going to cost? What is my leverage? What is my translation memory utilization? And then submitting that into Smartly for translation, and then getting it back into AEM once the translation workflow is finished. So the goal of this is really to create a fully automatic path for translation content. Are the resources in the correct workflows? Do you have the right translation memory? Do you have spelling dictionaries and glossaries set up? And do you have the right vendors and scope and pricing set up in the platform? The goal is to really automate this as much as possible. And when you think about the people actually creating the content for a website built in AEM, or some platform, even if it's internal built in AEM, they're not localization people. They're not localization managers. They shouldn't have to log into Smartly to authorize content or to check on the status of a particular job of content that might be submitted in Smartly. They need to be able to manage all of that directly within AEM. Workflows is important, and this is more on the localization side, but depending on the type of content you have, you want to be able to have the flexibility to build the workflow you need. And that may be a simple workflow of translation and editing. It may be something a little bit more complex. When we see clients working with, let's say, legal content, they may have a lawyer actually want to be part of the workflow to review the legal content as it moves through the platform. But the goal, again, is to remove any possible hindrance that could come through automating this as much as possible. And then you also want to make sure that you can include whoever you want to into the workflow. So whether it's third-party vendors you hire or internal resources, or maybe there's machine translation for long-tail content. You want to make sure that all of that is available and it's easy to use in the platform. And something that does differentiate Smartly is that we allow this to be just really as simple as drag and dropping a configuration and moving steps around. Whereas maybe in some other platforms, there's may have a consultant or something that may need to come in to actually build customizable workflow. This is inherent in the Smartly platform. Translator tools. So this is something where it's beyond just translation memory and quality checks and spell checking and glossary. It's really about issue management, version control, making sure you have the right leverage, and then something that we talk a lot about is context. Can you capture the actual layout of a web page? Can you capture the layout of a Word document? When you look at content that may be coming out of a platform, it may just be individual strings or individual sentences, but those sentences make up a story for a page or a website or a Word document, whatever it might be. And by capturing the context, the layout of a site, you can actually tell that story, and the translator is able to see how their translations impact the layout of a site, the layout of a Word document or an InDesign file, and they can make the best quality decisions overall. And then at the end of the process, you want to be able to measure and report on the translation process. So one thing we talk a lot about at SmartLing is translation velocity. How long did it take for content to get into the platform and get authorized into a workflow for the particular resources to work on that content for translation, and then pushed back and published into translation memory and pushed back into whatever platform had created that content? And that's translation velocity, and it's really about optimizing the workflow, the resources involved in the workflow to minimize the translation velocity. And it's something where you can also see, do I have the right vendors? Do I have the right internal reviewers? If all of my content is getting stuck at an internal review step, then they probably have other jobs that they need to do and they aren't focused on translation, and that's another point of optimization. And as you're looking at velocity, you can begin to optimize around the resources and workflow and type of content that you have in the platform. And beyond that is really just looking at quality. Are there a lot of spelling mistakes? Does content get rejected because of poor translation, or maybe there's spelling mistakes? Maybe there's context issues. Maybe you didn't have context for a web page or a mobile application, so the translator wasn't able to do the best job they could. And then, of course, cost. You want to make sure that you can always optimize around cost, having the right mix of professional translators and freelance translators, and can optimize your spend around the type of content that you've created. For SmartLing, our connector model is really built around automating as much as possible. When we look at AEM, we share a lot of the similar type of components. There's workflow, there's users, there's jobs, and it's really about optimizing all these different pieces. And we want to make sure, again, that content creators can stay in the platform, can stay in AEM, that they have the right information for costing and quoting directly in AEM. And the part that is the translation localization process really just happens in SmartLing, and they don't have to worry about the content in AEM. As soon as it's completed in SmartLing, it will automatically be pulled back into AEM. And I will now hand it over to Matthias at Adobe.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everyone. Thanks for calling in. Thanks for investing your valuable time listening to us here. It's a really important topic. My name is Matthias Siegel. I'm a product manager here at Adobe, working on the Experience Manager content management system. And since you're listening to us talk and watching anyways, we're pretty sure that you're familiar with translation management and realize how important translation management is for content management, and that the two, in fact, go hand in hand. That is something that is really important for us here at Adobe. We know that AEM is used by a large number of global corporations for global websites, but even if you have a smaller website, as soon as you start branching out into countries that don't speak English or that speak a different language than your original language, you're looking at translating content. In the past, very often, our customers, just like many other CMS users, will have left translation to the countries and pretty much delegated it down the food chain. Today, that doesn't work anymore. In our experience, that doesn't work anymore. And the reason why is that content changes, content updates occur at a faster and faster pace, meaning the velocity of content is increasing constantly, that translating manually and at the end of the food chain of content management simply doesn't work anymore. And that's why, in addition to everything else we're doing here at Adobe in the content management realm, investing into multilingual automation and translation integration is really important for us. those two go hand in hand. And the same also for us internally, running Adobe.com, which runs of Experience Manager as well, and which also, uses, for some parts, SmartLink as a translation service, a wonderful partnership, tight integration and close collaboration between content management and translation management is really important. So before showing you a couple of screenshots and a quick demo of how translation management is integrated with AEM, just wanted to share what we're trying to evangelize to every single one of our customers and partners, go-to-market partners as well, which is when it comes to global websites, to again not leave it up to the last minute and not leave it up to the final end of the content management food chain to think about translation, but to start with it. To start with it right in the beginning, right when you conceptualize a website. Think about a global content structure. I mean, how are you going to set up your language masters? How are you going to set up your translation masters? And how are you going to roll that content out into countries? It's really important. If you start out the website in English for the US because there's go-to-market pressure, time-to-market pressure, and think you will refactor that later for multilingual use cases, it will be a lot harder later, other than if you think about it right ahead of time. Secondly, also think about roles and responsibilities ahead of time. What is going to be the role of global versus the countries? What are countries permitted and supposed to do? What is global permitted and supposed to do? Where does translation happen? Does it happen on the global level or the local level? Very important to establish roles and responsibilities ahead of time. And then third, again, as I mentioned, don't leave translation up to do it yourself out in the countries, in the regions at the end of the food chain, but work with a translation partner, translation technology vendor such as SmartLink in order to get your global content structure right. In terms of Experience Manager, our customers have always worked with translation vendors and have always integrated translation vendors with AEM. But to be honest, up until a very recent release, the current release, 6.1, this has been a very kind of one-off kind of integration. And every translation vendor has worked and integrated with AEM slightly differently. With 6.1, we have started standardizing these integrations by introducing the notion of a translation integration framework and by introducing the notion of translation projects, so that translation vendors can focus on their core competence, which is content translation, and leave the rest, which is essentially content management, up to the CMS. Content management in terms of defining what content should be translated, what is the source, what is the target language, how should the content be translated, and to integrate with AEM through standardized connectors. This has started in 6.1. It's been a very successful implementation from a standpoint of integrating with multiple translation vendors, and working with SmartLink has been from the get-go a very successful collaboration. In fact, here on the slide here you can see other partners who are part of our ecosystem as well. But again, working with SmartLink has been great. It's the first connector that was up and running during the development cycle as a prototype internally, and we're very happy with that. So in AEM 6.1, translation management across multiple modules and solutions in AEM in terms of AEM sites, AEM assets, a digital asset management system, and AEM communities for user-generated content and published-site content translation is available via standardized connectors. And in fact, as you'll see in the quick demo, with 6.1, you can very easily instrument your site also for hybrid translation. To say a couple of branches in your website should go through human translation, whereas others go through machine translation. All this is available through the standardization of translation integration with AEM. So with that, let me switch over to my browser real quick and show you what this looks like in AEM. Here you see Experience Manager 6.1, which is our latest release in the touch-enabled UI. And when it comes to translation integration, the first place that you go to is the marketplace, the formerly called Packager, now we call it Adobe Marketing Cloud Exchange. And in this exchange, in this online marketplace, you find connectors that are available for AAM ready to go for you to download. So you simply click connector. Here you see the SmartLink collector connector first in line, and they install into AAM as a standardized connector. Very simple. It's just a matter of a couple of clicks. Once installed in AAM, they get configured as to what the with regards to their user authentication and the connectivity with the backend, and then you're ready to go to instrument your site for translation. When it comes to instrumenting the site for translation, the nice thing in AAM is that you have the notion of cloud services. And just like you can instrument an AAM site with any cloud services, meaning external services that provide a service for your website, just like through Adobe Target for personalization or Adobe Analytics for analytics, you can also instrument your site with cloud services for translation. So here we see SmartLink is instrumented as a translation service on this site, which means for the entire site throughout the hierarchy, SmartLink is instrumented on every page as the translation service. Here, by the way, you see what we consider a best practice for a content structure for a global website with language masters that Global works with, starting in English, or it could be another language if the starting point if your content management is in another country. And then from English, we translate into translation masters, into language masters. And from those translated language masters, then we roll the content out, in case of AAM with AAM Multi-Site Manager, to the respective country sites. So this notion of global language masters is a very important best practice in AAM. In order to, so I mentioned before, so the website is instrumented for translation with SmartLink now. Just in this one particular branch here, let me show you the properties here. Here, I changed this instrumentation and I configured Microsoft Translator as a translation service. So you can see different translation services can be instrumented on different branches or different pages of your website in order to perform translation. Or it could have been SmartLink human translation or SmartLink machine translation, for different branches. What this allows you to do is when it comes to creating translation projects, which you do through the references rail in AAM, where you see all the languages that are available displayed, and through standardized AAM functionality that is the same for all translation services that are integrated. We can update the language copies and we can create translation projects that then once we create these translation projects, all of the content is being automatically imported into these projects as to their instrumentation for translation, which we'll see here. So for German and French, in this case here, we had it instrumented for machine translation in that one branch that you might remember was called services, and the rest of the tree was instrumented for human translation to SmartLink. Translation projects are being set up and created, and they contain, besides an overview pod, team and tasks for review and approval, for example, and then most importantly, the translation job that contains all of the content that I mentioned before, all of the pages that were part of that branch and all associated assets as well. And so we can send assets, digital assets in terms of images, for example, for translation also. All set up, created automatically, can be configured certainly, can be customized, but all set up automatically. So that all that's left for the end user is really to request a scope from the translation vendor, kind of a high-level scope, it's displayed in AAM, and then later you can go in the translation vendor's backend system to get more detailed information on the scope. And then most importantly, to click Start. And what that does is to have AAM gather up all of the content in XML format and create a translation job and send the translated content out to the translation vendor. Translation vendor does what they do, just to translate the content with the translation memory and all that. and after that send the content back to AEM, and AEM automatically via the API ingests the content and puts it back on your site. So this is a very quick, understand, fly-through through our kind of thoughts and how important we consider translation management to be, and a quick demo of how it works in 6.1. And with that, let me hand it back to Andrew, who I believe is going to show you how, what this workflow looks like after user click starts and after SmartLink receives the content on their back end in order to perform the actual translation.
Great. Thank you, Matthias. So I'll pick up where Matthias left off. Here we can see that we are in AEM, and we have several translation projects. So once you push start in AEM on a translation job, that content is packaged up and sent to SmartLing where the actual translation will happen. So I'm going to jump over to the SmartLing translation dashboard. And I won't go through all of the components here. There are a lot of different pieces, from managing team to managing workflow and deciding and being able to integrate different third parties into the workflow, getting estimates, adding people to workflow steps. There's a lot of functionality and flexibility in the platform, in addition to reporting, API information, et cetera. What I'll focus on here is just really the translation component. So in this case, we have a queue for content that has been authorized into German. We can see that there's some information that's in the workflow. If there was instructions or things that needed to be added to content to provide more information to translators, that's available here, as well as history. If there were multiple revisions of content, that would also be noted in the history section. So all of the information is around content, as well as TM leverage, is all available within the SmartLing platform. If we add a translation, and SmartLing is a role-based platform, so different users have different views of content. In this case, I have a geometrics page, which, if you're familiar with EM, you're familiar with geometrics. But a major component of the SmartLing platform is context, and that is context from AEM, it's context from an iOS application, it's context from other platforms and Word documents, all these different components. And really the idea here is that translators are able to see how their translations impact the layout of a site. If you go from an 8-letter word in English to a 20-letter word in German or Swedish, then the layout and your header and footers and everything might need to be adjusted to take the increase in length. So one, it is a quality control issue. Translators have better sense of what the content is. They can translate better. But overall, it reduces QA time. So you want to, as we talk about velocity, you want to increase the velocity and reduce the speed and reduce the time to market so that you can really get the content translated and back into AEM as quickly as possible. So essentially, translators see the context of a page. They're able to work through all of the content that might be in their queue. And then once it is submitted, once the job is complete, the job will be pulled back into AEM automatically. And that is actually a quick demo of the SmartLing platform. There are, of course, a lot more components as far as managing glossary and style guides. There's TM leverage. There's a lot of things around fuzzy matching and estimates. A lot of things that are very particular to localization, but a lot of things that are just important as far for content creators, as well as others who might be participating in the management of a translation project. And with that.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is Steve. Now we're going to move to the next portion of the webinar, which is our audience Q&A. So we have a number of questions, and we still have time. If you have more questions, please submit them through the GoToWebinar platform. Encourage that, and we'll get to as many as we can. But let me start with this question. Do you have any examples of companies using SmartLing and AEM? And can you please elaborate them on how they're using it and so on?
Sure, this is Matt. I can address that, Steve. Well, as Matthias mentioned, Adobe actually uses our connector internally for some of the AEM projects they work on within their support organization. And we have a number of large enterprises around the world that are using the connector. One I'll mention is the Intercontinental Hotel Group. They're using it for their consumer-facing websites, for online bookings, and all of the interaction with the various Intercontinental Hotel brands. And so they're using many of the features that Andrew described, including our in-context translation and review capability and managing their translation memory, all within SmartLing, and of course, using our connector to seamlessly integrate with AEM.
Super, thank you. Is it possible to use SmartLing with an existing translation vendor?
So I think I'll take that one too. As Andrew touched on, our system is designed as a software platform. And much like AEM, we are always striving to provide the best features and functionality to maximize translation velocity, just as Adobe wants to maximize content creation velocity. And the various users in the system are flexible. So if our customers have an existing translation service relationship, when they launch their SmartLing instance, they can use that translation resource or resources. We're very good at managing multiple translation resources around the world and providing a centralized management capability. But if they don't have one, we can help provide translation services on their behalf. But it's very flexible. We focus on making the very best software and maximizing the quality and functionality provided for translators and other users within the system.
Next question is for Matthias. Where can I download the AEM connector for SmartLing? Or maybe that's for you, Matt, as well.
Yeah, directly
Matthias,
in the
you go first.
Yeah, in the Experience Manager package share or Marketing Cloud Exchange, which is accessible from directly within AEM. So you can download from AEM, but you can also certainly get it from SmartLing directly also, I'm sure.
Can you share a little bit more about what's involved in installing it?
It's just a matter of a couple of clicks, which is the beauty with having a standardized API and standardized implementations. It downloads from the AEM package share as a standard package. It's the AEM terminology. It's the package which you install through the AEM package manager, which is literally just clicking install on that one screen that I showed.
Thank you. And I believe this one is for Matt or Andrew. How does SmartLing differ from other AEM localization integrations?
So Andrew's looking at me. I'll say a few things, and then he may want to provide some feedback as well. So there's a bunch of different ways we approach the market. I touched on some, and our philosophy for how we manage our platform and deliver great software for our customers. The first, which can't be overemphasized, is we really try to provide contextual interfaces across the board, not just for web experiences and customer experiences that are created within AEM, but also for any of the companion content formats that are typically offered up alongside AEM. So e-commerce platforms, we have integrations with several, including Demandware and Hybris. We're working with retail content typically created in Adobe InDesign, where the layout of a product package or a hang tag for a garment or for point-of-sale retail content is very specific and on brand, and translated and localized versions of those are really only best managed in context so that the users know exactly what's important behind that layout and how that will affect the look and feel of the ultimate content. So context is super important. The next piece is really about that translation service flexibility we talked about, allowing our customers to use whichever translation resource they choose and to add new additional translation resources at any time with the click of a button. There are many more, but I think those are two that really differentiate us from some of the other solutions available for AEM, or for that matter, available for other enterprise content systems out there in the market.
Thanks. Along the same lines, This is a question from one of our audience members. I'm shopping for a solution. What are the most important factors I should be looking at when comparing different technologies?
Right. So from the SmartLing side and from the translation platform side, it's really about making sure that you're thinking ahead beyond just what your current project is. Like, are you looking at platforms that have the tools to connect across your organization? Are you looking at a platform that allows you as much control as you want, or maybe offers the services to manage the process for you if you don't have the resources to manage it yourself? Different types of reporting so that you can look at return on investment, issues management, quality control. All of those types of things are really important. And then as you look at as you're into a platform, you may want to switch platforms at some point. It's not likely that you would, once you adopt AEM, you probably wouldn't switch AEM every month or something. But if you're looking at different marketing solutions, you want to make sure that you have a platform that is open, that can connect to different other third parties. So and is it easy to make the switch? Does your translation memory automatically update, and can you get the leverage and users and vendors into all the different types of content you have? So it's really about just the flexibility and the openness of a platform, and not getting locked into something that doesn't let you expand as your translation needs expand.
Matthias or Matt, did you want to add to that at all?
I think Andrew hit on some of the key points I would. Matthias, you may have some guidance from the Adobe side.
No, you covered that very well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, that was the final question. So I want to first thank our speakers again. Matthias Siegel, Group Product Manager for AEM for Adobe, Matt DeLoca, Vice President Channel Alliances for SmartLing, and Andrew. Program worthwhile. Again, it has been recorded. You'll be able to view it on demand. You'll be able to share it on demand afterward. We'll send out an email with the link. Hope to have you participate in future programs. Have a great afternoon, and happy holidays to all.